If you watch this video, you're going to see me cut a nipple off. In this episode of Aston1936.com, I'm going to continue my journey installing an infotainment system upgrade from Aston Installations. Now, an option on that system was to fit a front and a rear parking camera. So today we're going to be talking about fitting the front parking camera. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you watch this video and you're going to undertake this video is going to save you 3 or 4 hours of heartache and trying to figure out how to get the hardest step of it done. Because I swear I spent 2 to 3 hours banging my head on the wall trying to solve this, and then I got some expert help from James at Aston Installation on a Sunday, and he guided me through the trick to the process, and I'm going to show it to you. So let's take this thing over to the bench and have a look at it. Let's take a closer look at the camera that they provide in their kit. So they obviously don't make the camera. This is a really good brand, Kenwood, and this is a made-for-purpose universal multi-view parking camera. And what's cool about it is that the mode button that we've installed in the kit includes an ultra-wide-angle view, a wide view, an overhead view, and a corner view. So the camera is doing some image processing, showing you what's left and right. So it's not just a dumb camera that sits at the front. So the camera itself is here. It's got an ultra-wide angle lens on it, adhesive tape. It's got some screw adjustments on the side so we can move it up and down and angle it a little bit. And then it has the harness. And what's interesting to note about the harness is it can be separated right here, which is great because we're going to want to be able to have a front serviceable connection. So if we ever have to take the front bumper off, we can disconnect the camera at the bumper and not have to pull out all the cabling to take care of that. So there's about 6 feet of cable here on the front camera section. The main bundle of cables here, there is something I'd like you to do before you start your process, is I wanted to have about 8 feet of untangled cable ready to go. This is going to be the part I'm going to pull through the firewall. So I've detangled that, and I'm going to have that ready to go as a separate pile. And then the other part of the cable, I've already had to do something about. When the kit came, all the wires for about the last 4 feet were just individual strands. And it was sort of making it for an ungodly mess. So if you watch this time lapse, you'll see that I basically took my fabric wiring harness tape and I've wrapped the cables down, and I've kept about a foot, maybe 16 inches of the button camera connectors loose, and then I wrapped all the way down to the built-in fuse module for the power and video feeds. And this will work out just about right when I get it into the car where I'm hooking up to the Aston Installation head unit. And it makes it, for these parts, it's not a big old floppy mess of wires. So I've done that little bit of work to get this ready. So for now, I'm just going to leave this end of it bundled back up. I've got this part loose and ready to go. And let's take a look at the tools we're going to need next. So we need a number of simple tools and some basic supplies that I wanted to cover with you. So let's go over the tools real quick. I have a 10mm socket and a 10mm wrench, and I have a long extension that I'm going to end up using with the socket and a ratchet. We're going to use that to remove the engine compartment fuse mounting bolts. You probably won't need this, but you might need a T30 Torx to take out a couple of plastic clips. These end nippers, so these are cutters, but they are, so you could come at something right from the front. these are going to turn out to be instrumental in the process, at least on my car. So you're going to need something to do a little trimming. Small Phillips, I don't know what size this is called, it's a size 1 Phillips screwdriver. That's if you want to adjust the camera mounting screws. An automotive trim clip removing tool is awfully helpful. We need a couple of shop towels, and I'm going to take one and I'm going to fold it in half a couple of times and then roll it up, because I'm going to end up using this as a spacer. And you'll see how in the video. An inspection light is going to be critical, a small one to get into a tight space, so we're going to use that for sure. And then we're going to need to use, I have my fender liner. You can use a towel over your fender, but you might be leaning in over the paintwork, so you might want to have a fender cover. Then this magic tool, which you've seen me use potentially in some other videos, this isn't just a big, that almost 3-foot long zip tie. It's soft, and I'm going to be using it as a wire fish, and you're going to see how I use it. Now you can get these out of the home center over in the HVAC department usually. I'm sure you can get them off Amazon. These things are only a couple of dollars for a bag full. So this is, you might be able to improvise something else, but I'm definitely going to be using that tool. We're going to need some zip ties to tidy up and mount the wiring. So these are some basic black 8-inch zip ties you could get off Amazon, and I'll probably have a link in the description down below. Then we need some wire, some fishing line, something semi-rigid that you can push through an opening. So this is baling wire, and this is one option. This is wire that you might use to hang picture frames. You can also get that at the home center. But this is just plain old string trimming line. And this is actually what I ended up using. It's plastic, it's not conductive electrically, and still rigid enough that you can pull on it like crazy, and it's not going to damage any other wiring when I'm using it as a wire pull. So this is what I'm going to go with. I'm going to probably use about 4 feet of it, and we'll trim off a piece of that and use it later on in the video. And then the last supply I'm going to be using is some liquid wrench silicone spray. You could use some WD-40, some oil, but we're basically going to be lubricating a wire that we're pulling through a grommet. So this is a nice way to do that, but you can improvise with something else you might have on hand. Also going to use a little bit of masking tape and electrical tape to do the wire pulling, and then I've got a Sharpie marker for doing some marking on that. So a whole bunch of little bits, but none of these are exotic tools, and let's talk about the first steps in getting ready to do the task. So this is a project where you have to get some steps out of the way beforehand. Now I've done videos on all of these steps that'll be linked up above here, but as you can see, I've got my car off the ground because I actually removed the road wheel. I'm a left-hand drive car, so the fuse box is in the right-hand footwell, so I'm going to be pulling the wires on the right-hand side. So I've removed the right-hand road wheel, and I've removed the right-hand inner fender liner, which is sitting over here on the floor. I've also done some steps under the hood where I've already removed the slam panel, the panel that covers this area, because we're going to be working underneath it. So that's sitting over here on the table. So that's a fair bit of work, but don't panic. All those steps are simple. Like I said, I've got videos on all of them. So the next thing we're going to get on with is removing this interior panel. So if we can come in here and have a look. So this area is obviously where the air comes through the grill and then hits the different radiators. Here's your outside air temperature sensor. If you ever have the dash saying that it's 150 degrees or minus 70 outside when it's not, this is the sensor you're going to have to get in to change, which is really simple once you know it's under the slam panel. Anyways, this cover that's held in by these 4 push clips is what we're going to want to take out the clips so that we can get a little bit of access in behind. We won't be able to remove the cover, but we are going to be able to flex it away. So basically this is where we're going to use the trim tool. And now these have a T30 Torx top on them, but they just spin for me, because these are actually, I'll show you in a second. So I'm going to get under it gently, and I'm just going to ease it out of the hole. And what this really is a T30 plastic screw thing that basically expands out to lock the plastic cover in. So if I squeeze these little tabs, the threads finally engage, and then you can back it out. And so once you've backed the screw out that far, this should pull out easier, but once it's with it all the way in, for whatever reason, the threads just spin when I try to turn this. So I just found using a pry tool, we can pop these up and then do what I'm doing here and reset these like that, so it'll be ready for when we put the car back together. And while you're doing that, you want to make sure you don't smash the end of the pull tool down into the radiator and bend all those little fins, so just be careful. The area we want to get into is, we can now see, is if we can just pull this cover back like this, we can see this wiring harness loom. There's the horns for the car are tucked in here, and it's going to give us access to get our hands down in here where we're going to actually get the wire from the front mounted camera. And this is where we're going to meet up the join between the harness that starts in the car and the little 6-foot section that's going to be attached to the camera. And then we'll zip tie it to this loom. So this, now that we have that axis, let's actually lay out where the camera's going to sit. And I'm going to show you something that I found surprising. I was just thinking, yeah, well, here's the circular, this is the cover for the tow hook. I'll just line the camera up underneath here at the center of the car. And now I'm going to give you a tip. That's a mistake. This is not the center of the car, and let me show you. So I gotta be me. I happen to have a construction laser that can throw a perfect vertical line. So I set it up, and I have it running through the center of the hood mounted logo exactly, and then it perfectly hits the center bar of the grille. And here you go. This is offset to the left side of the car, by an inch or two. So I was trying to basically find the dead center of the bumper so that when I'm sticking the camera into place, I'd be able to line it up visually. And you're going to kind of have to decide which one of these lower grill marks you're going to pass the cables through. So this is just sort of a visual clue, and I'm just making a mark now on there. And then what I really wanted to decide is which one of these little grill mesh holes do I pass the cable through. And so I'm just doing this row of tape to the right of the line, and I can see it's going to be that hole right there. This is the one I'm going to pass the cables through, and then I'm going to mount the camera right here on the center line of the vehicle. Now, depends on what your version of feng shui is. You might think that's going to look too weird, so I'll have the lens in line with the center line of the car, but if this is right here and it's drawing your eye, well, you could always just offset it and line it up with this, your own choice. But anyways, for the sake of my project, I'm going to run it through that hole right there. Here's our camera, and I've got it disconnected. So one thing I wanted to do real quick was just cover over the lens with a piece of blue tape, just so I don't scratch it up while I'm kind of banging things around. And now we can look down here, and so there's the spot. So I chose this particular hole with the arrow because I want the cable to line up, and the camera is going to be mounted something like that. So the cable has to come off the back and poke through there. So going through the highest one isn't the right option. We want to basically go through one that's about at the height of the back of the camera. So when we look at this connector, and I'm going to basically just pull this aside now. So it just fits through. And we're going on a little bit of a fishing expedition. And I'm turning the wire and I'm feeding it in a little further. And I'm trying to get it up onto a rear shelf in there. So it's sitting up on top of the radiator there, kind of underneath where the horns are. And so now we're going to go up top here. There they are. So I'm just going to reach down with my fingers. And that's the first step of the journey. So now, I've basically pulled back the slack, and you can see here that, you know, I can mount the camera forward or back, and I'm not going to stick this down yet until towards the end, but so that's that part of the process out of the way. And I'm not going to dress these wires yet, but my idea here is I don't maybe want them right between the horns. Or I guess I do, because that's the way it falls naturally. But I'm going to want to bring it in, and I'm going to end up bundling the cables. And I'm going to follow this loom, this wiring loom bundle, just like the Aston Martin would have done. And I'm going to zip tie to the same mounting points so that it looks as professional as I can make it. But I'm going to do all that tidying up of the wires at the end. So we just finished the most satisfying portion and the easiest part of the project, getting the camera in at the front. Now it's time for the hard work. So we're here in the passenger compartment footwell on my left-hand drive car, so this is the right-hand side. The cabin fuse box is underneath here, and if you've been watching my video on installing the Aston installations kit, you know this is where all the wiring ends up. So here's our wiring, and we need to get this connection now from back here where all the brains are. We have to get this connector through the firewall of the car, through the fender area, and up to that connection up at the front camera. So this is where the real work starts, but we're actually going to start the project from outside this area. We're not actually starting inside here. Let's go do some work up in the fender well and near the engine bay fuse box. So the route we're actually going to follow to get from the wiring tail here is we are going to come under, I'm going to try and follow the factory wiring looms. We're going to come underneath this cover. We're going to come up on the side here. We're going to bring the wire up around in here and meet up with this main part of the wiring loom. We're going to run along inside the fender well, or I'll show you this a little bit more, till we have to somehow make the passage through into the passenger compartment. And I sat here for hours, literally, trying to figure out how I would get a wire through here. There are heat shields, sound insulation, no space to work, millions of other wires, air conditioning lines, cooling lines. And it was James that coached me through this process to show me how the hidden trick. Aston actually anticipated someone might want to pull some extra wires through. So there are some pre-installed ports that we can utilize. So while we're up here, I've got my fender liner in place. This, on a left-hand drive car, this is the engine bay fuse box. And if we can see right up here at the top, there is a 10mm mounting screw. So we're going to undo that while we're up here before we move down underneath the car. So I've got my 10mm socket on a long extension. It's not torqued very tight. And the key here is just not to drop it. So it's loose, and I'm actually going to go after it with a magnetic pickup tool. And out it comes. So let's go down into the wheel well for a closer look at the other one. So we're here inside the fender well now, and a little orientation then, so the liner is out, but I've also got the steering turned completely to the left to make a bigger pocket of space for here to work in, because what we're going to try and work in is back here. And another tip, if you want to save your clothes, You might want to take an old towel and completely throw it over top the brake caliper and the brake system, because as I kept working myself into this space, I have a big old black stripe up my back of brake dust. So you might throw something, a cover over this. So I talked about the wire is going to run inside the fender well. Well, here's this main wiring loom piece, and it clips up here, and it's all inside the fender liner, so it'll be nice and dry. It actually runs along up here, along here, and then we can even look down here and see, there's the top of the radiator core. That's where I'm heading. I'm basically following that loom up to the front of the car, and I'm going to zip tie along that wiring loom as a way to secure it so it looks as professional as possible. But now you're starting to see the bottom of the engine bay fuse box, and we took out the upper screw, and now we're going to try and go after this lower 10mm bolt that's right there so that we can get a little bit of flexibility in the fuse box. There we have it. Now, this isn't coming out. We've just added a little bit of flexibility, but it's going to give us space to get our hand into a tight spot here. And this is where our rolled up shop towel is going to come into play. I want to get this and kind of hold it up, and that'll take care of the job for me. Just needs anything you might have around the shop, but and we want to kind of push that as far in as we can because we're trying to make a pocket of space in here. Now, this is where the nightmare begins. Where this harness runs down into the space, and here's the filler hose for the washer fluid bottle, and this cable with this flag on it, this is the main battery cable that comes up to feed this fuse box. Also, just a note right now, be careful working around each of these wires. You do not want to damage an existing wire, or you're going to start to have all sorts of other weird, strange problems with your Aston. So respect this fuse box area. But we're going to try and follow along this main power feed cable to just to the right of this cable, and I'm going to show you what I have to do. But basically, if I stick my hand in all this way, and I think it was James that said, okay, stick your hand in till it hurts, then jam it in a little further. And right in there, and of course you can't see anything right now, I can feel a little nipple just to the right of the main wiring loom where it passes through the firewall. So that's useless footage for you, but at least you know where I'm reaching in here. So I gotta be me. You know I have a borescope, and so what I did, just so that I'd be able to actually get some footage of that for you, is I rigged it up on a tripod here. So now if I pass this down that little space to the left of the main battery cable and to the right of the main harness, you'll see this rubber nipple that looks like a 3-tiered wedding cake appear at the end. And that's actually what we're going to be working on to try to cut it off. So if you happen to have a handy borescope here in your setup, you could do it like a doctor doing endoscopic surgery and stick that camera in there and do the work. So cutting that nipple off is the monumental challenge. Everything I've shown you so far is the easy part. There's so little clearance to get your hand into that space. So once you're in there, and what I found is I could get myself in here, I could get the camera, or I could get a light up in there, and if I got myself into just the right position with my right eye only, I can see the end of the nipple. What I found is I could take my light and I could tuck it in like that and sit it in there so everything was well lit. And I still had room to get my hand into the space. But how do you cut something off where just the tip of your finger can touch it? Now, Aston Installations might have a better way to do it. I attacked it with long screwdrivers, trying to just shear it off. I had my long needle nose pliers trying to do that. And ultimately what I found was that I could get in there with these end snipping dikes and regular side cutters, because they're so, I can't really get my hand to do any motion other than this. So I jammed this in there, and I fiddled around. I don't have a better way to describe it until I just lucked out and I got the jaws to slip over the top of the wedding cake, and then I was able to just squeeze the handles hard enough and snip that off and wrestle with it a bit until I was able to snip it and it came away. So that's really your challenge. If you're sitting there getting yourself steeled, take a break before you begin this part. Deep breath, go at it, and do whatever it takes with yours. Maybe a long pair of scissors might do the trick. Maybe you can leave comments down below on how you accomplish it. But that's actually the hardest part of the project, is snipping the tip off that nipple. So once you've been successful and you've got the nipple clipped off, it should look like this. I ran the camera in and I took a couple of photos. And you can see where I've cut off the top 2 layers of the cake. And now there's an actual hole that you can pass a cable through into the passenger compartment. So this is where the fishing line comes into place. Now we have to basically take something rigid and fish it back from this side, and we're going to poke it through into the passenger compartment side. And now we're working around all these lines. This is why I wasn't interested in really using something sharp and pointy that could break another line. I don't know what I'm going to be jamming through on the other side. So the heavy duty weed whacker trimming line was what I chose. So basically I got in here and I shot a video with the bore scope where you can just see me poking it, lining it up, kind of a fishing expedition, and then I poked it through. So once I got it through, I fed as much line through as I possibly could. I probably got about a foot of it went through on the other side because I didn't really know where it was going to show up in the footwell, but I wanted to have plenty of it there so I could feel around and see if I could find it. So let's go take a look in the footwell. We're through the worst part, I think. Hope, knock on wood. So now we're going to basically want to find this end of the string line. So I'm going to pull this aside. And I'm going to pull the carpet back, which you've probably been doing already. Now, I've already got the fuse box cover off because I'm still in the process of my Aston Installations kit install. But what we need to access is up in here behind this carpet. This is where the string comes through. So this pulls down. You might have a plastic clip that you just have to ease back with the clip removal tool. And it exposes this little shelf where all the wiring is. And there it is. There's the string line. So it comes from up higher in there, but you may have to fiddle your fingers around in the wires here. If your spouse or friend is around, they might be able to go move the wire in and out, and you'll feel it and hear it until you can just get a grip on it. So the other thing I want to make sure is that it's not spiral wound around any of the other cable bundles, because I want to be able to feed my cable through unobstructed to get into that grommet area. So here's our pull line. Bring through as much of it as you need, because now what we're going to do is we're going to tape on our actual video cable feed from this end. So there's small connectors in this little bundle. So this is the thickest part that's going to be going through. So I work in an industry where I have to do some wire pulling fairly often. So the trick I'm going to follow is I'm going to put this nylon line through the middle of this cable bundle, but I do not want to pull just on this end. That would be a mistake. So I'm sleeving it through there. And then what I'm going to do is I want it to be at least flat when it's going across this big thick part, because I don't want to make it like wound around where it makes it even thicker. I want to make it as minimal of a profile as possible. And then down here at the bottom, I'm going to do a wrap like that. And this is where it's really going to get its grip from. So now I'm going to get my electrical tape, and as smoothly as possible, I want to get this taped on. So I want to pay particular attention as I get to the end here. I want to make what one of my friends, Ray, calls a torpedo.
and I'll explain it a little bit more here once I get this finished, but I want a cone sort of shaped tip as the leading edge so that it can push itself through a little easier. So this thick part here, I want to try and have a taper on that, so as it gets to the pokey part where it has to pull through, there's a bit of a cone shape happening at the front here. And then I'm going to leave just a little flag. So that's going to be the hardest part to get through that grommet hole. Now I also need to think about the tail end. This is a bad idea because if I get stuck for some reason and I decide I need to pull it back out, that's going to be a disaster. So I'm also going to do a bit of a tidy up on the tail end here so it's nice and smooth if I have to pull it back out. So that's what I have to get through that grommet hole, and it's super well attached now because it's spiral round and it's taped on that whole way. So I want to lubricate this with the silicone spray, but I'm not just going to spray it around in here and try and get it on there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to soak a section of rag with it. And then I'm going to go at getting this all slicked up. Now I don't want that to transfer to the carpet. That's why I've got this blue cloth in here. So that's all pretty slippery now. So, and I'm going to make sure that I have the cable free and clear in here so that it can just pull towards that without running into anything. And so I'm going to get that 6 or 7 feet loosened up and laid out here. And it's just going to be a slow pull. You can come back and check that it's going through, but essentially as soon as this big thick bit pulls through, it's going to be easy after that. So we're back in the wheel well on the other end of the pull string. So you need to use some judgment here. It's going to be stiff getting that head through. So if you hit a real serious amount of resistance, you should stop. Go back, pull it back a little bit, check on it. Now I've not done this before, so I'm just literally hoping it's going to make it. So I'm pulling fairly stiffly, and you can just see it starting to, the heads come through, which is the beginning of it. It's a little gross what's happening next, but here it comes through now. And here we go. I've got basically the cable through. So I'm not going to take this off. I'm actually going to use this for pulling some of the rest of it. But now's the time to pull through that 6 or 7 feet. We can always pull back, but you know, that's kind of the amount of length that I wanted to get. So that's the hardest part out of the way. Honestly, the next parts to me are just detailed trimming and routing work. So let's get started on that. So I want to basically follow up along the main loom here. I'm not going to do too scientifically. I'm going to come back with zip ties. But so I want to go along there. It goes up above this water hose. So I'm going to take this end, I'm going to fish it behind that. So I've come under here. I'm going to come up high because I want to stay above the fender liner. I'm just going to pull my slack through. So you can see here, I've got enough where I'll be able to zip tie on, zip tie on, zip tie on. So now we need to bridge this gap from here through to the engine compartment area. So I've wedged myself in here, and now I've got my flexible, zip tie. And what I'm going to do is there's that wiring harness. There's my cable hanging in the foreground. And I'm trying to get through a little gap. So watch the tip of this. There's the main wiring harness. I'm just touching along with the tip of this. I can see daylight down there. So I want to get this through. Essentially now I'm into the area up by the radiator. So I'm going to tape on to the end of this and pull the cable through. bag. So I've taped that on. Yeah. And then it pulls right through. So again, I'm not going to come back and dress this wiring quite yet, but let's switch around to the front of the car now. So the next leg of the journey is I want to get from where we're daylighting here next to the harness, I want to get around the radiator support. You could just say, screw it, I'm going to drop in here and come down in front here and kind of catch up that way. But I don't want to see that. And this is also a wet area. So I'm going to do a little bit more work to try and hide it. And I'm using my tie wrap again. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a little fishing in here. And I'm going in, I'm trying to find a passage forward, and I can't. And there we are. I've pulled in behind this whole support. So now it's just a matter of tape on again, and let's see if we can pull it through. And there we go. I can just see my wire on top of this main electrical trunk. So then the next part of the routing, I was originally thinking I could fish underneath the air inlet for the right side airbox inlet, but I can get the fish through there, but there's a metal edge that I can't seem to get the wire to turn. So I took the alternate route as I just hooped it over the front of the air intake and kind of looped it around, just looped it around, and it's sitting now coming out underneath it from the front side. And then I'm just going to take this and tuck it in behind the cover. And now I have my two ends of the cable in the right neighborhood to get married up. So time to pull off the pull string. So I've removed the pull string. You can already see the electrical tape was leaving some black goo on here. And so what I've decided I want to do is I'm going to zip tie the camera bundle onto the main harness about there. And I just have this portion, and then I'll make this connection, and then I'm going to zip tie that down again to this bundle so that it's kind of like a strain relief. And then we'll finish it like that. So let me just tuck this cable in alongside the harness. Make my connection. I'm going to add a little bit of electrical tape just to seal that connection over. I hate electrical tape because it leaves a residue, but I don't want that coming apart. And I'd like to keep it dry because there's going to be some moisture up here. So now I'm going to take a zip tie, come down around underneath all of that. Don't need to make it super tight, just need it to not go anywhere. Trim off the connection, and that's not going to go anywhere. And it's protected from the debris coming from the front, and when we close the cover, you'll never know it's there. So now I have my push pins that I can seal this all back up. Basically push it down. You don't have to use a screwdriver. You can just push and drive the pin home with your fingertip. And now the front cover is back on, so let's worry about mounting the camera next. Now you get to do the only part that can be seen from outside the car. We're going to permanently affix the camera where it's going to go. The first thing you should do though is make sure that the area you're going to attach it to is clean, as you would with any time you're going to stick a sticker on. So I have a little bit of alcohol and water, and I'm just giving it a wipe down. You could have wax or, you know, dirt or whatever underneath here, so you want it to be a nice clean, dry surface. Yep, feels good. So the camera has adhesive already on the bottom, and I was asking James at Aston Installation, will you mount it all the way forward, all the way back, in the middle, and he said he goes for all the way back. So that's what I'm going to do, and I have my alignment marks to help me get oriented. Okay, so I'm standing in front of the car, looking back at it, easing it up. And there we go, the unveiling. So, you know, probably make sure you've got good contact. Now, there's probably going to be some alignment process for commissioning this. You know, you can adjust these screws, give it a little tilt up or tilt down, but that'll be another video. For now, I just wanted to get it installed. And we can just sort of see the cable disappearing up to where we were at through the grill there. So that's as professional as I can make it look, but I think that's as good as anyone can make it look. So one tip I just got from James at Aston Installations is that I have it installed upside down. If you come in for a closer look, you can just see the Kenwood branding is what James noticed on the bottom here. That's supposed to be on the top. He also suggested that I add more angle down to this. So let's do a quick remove the two screws and adjust that. All right, so Kenwood to the top. Good, okay. So with the screws loosely in, James also suggested we get some down angle on here. So I'm gonna kind of put it in about like that. We'll see how that works out once we commission the camera. All right, well, hopefully that's about a good place to start, and let's get on with the rest of it. So inside the fender well, we don't have to be too exotic. I'm just gonna clip on to the main harness right where the zip ties are that are already on it. This will all be encapsulated by the fender well, so it should be fairly dry in there, but I just want it to look professional, so here we go. All right, there we go. So only took a couple of minutes to do that. Now it's time to get the fuse box back into place. Generally back into position. I'm going to try to get the lower bolt started. Okay, so before I tighten that one, I'm going to get up top and get the top one started. So I now have to sort of basically position it so I can see that the hole lines up. More or less just going to stick my hand in here with the bolt. Now this doesn't need to be torqued to anything serious. It's a PEM stud, so just snug. All right, and then I'm just going to reach through the fender well with the wrench and just finish this one up snug. All right, so that concludes the mechanical portion. You can get your wheel back on, or your fender liner back in, your wheel back on, your slam panel back on, get your hood closed, and let's go finish up the very last steps in the car. Well, we finally got it all installed back to the footwell. You know, I've tucked the carpet back into position, and I have the cable bundle sitting here. Now, this video isn't all about how to finish your infotainment system hookups. You can check out my other video on installing the Aston installations kit, and you'll see me how I basically terminate these to the connectors that are hidden behind this carpet. But there's a lot of cable left here. As part of the dressing, when I finish that, you'll probably see me finish this up and do a bundle where I zip tie mount, you know, the bulk of it up on this flat plateau above the fuse box. There's probably like 6 or 8 feet of it here, and then I'll just run the little portion I need back to where the connectors are here. So that's it. We've got the beast installed. Now we can probably get on to our next project, which is likely going to be the rear parking camera, which you'll probably find a link to that video up here. Down here, you'll find a link to my companion blog article. It'll have links to the other videos, as well as other tips and tricks and tools and supplies that I use in the process. If you like to get videos like these, please go ahead and subscribe. And as always, I love to hear your comments. Please tell me what I did right, what I did wrong, how you did it a little differently, what it was like in your car that was different than mine. Please leave those down in the comments so everyone can share in them. Thanks for watching.